So for anybody that's interested, the history of, wired stoppers is, somewhat storied, if you will. Back in the day, of course, it was natural gear. You were slinging horns, you were slinging chalk stones. We can talk about that. There was pitons, but chalkcraft, nutcraft, where did that come from? At first, back in sort of 30s, 40s, 50s, 1950s, Don Willens, Joe Brown would have a pocket full of their favorite rocks that were, the right shape, and they would stick those in a crack, and they might, they'd thread a sling around it, and that was their, those were the first sort of chalk stones. They started out, ones that were natural, then they started bringing, basically started bringing little rocks with them to put in the cracks. Then later in Great Britain, the climbers would be walking along the railway tracks, and to get to the climbs in Britain or Scotland, and they would, they found machine nuts that had fallen off of trains. So then they started picking up the nuts, and of course the machine nuts were nice. They had a hole in it, so they'd thread a sling through the hole in the machine nut, and that became part of the gear. And then they had different sized nuts, machine nuts, and then eventually somebody started to custom make them, and a well-known guy by the name of Yvon Chouinard started making eccentrics, which had multiple sizes, and they had purlon. And then eventually that evolved into the first wired stoppers, and the first wired stoppers were, I don't think I have any. They were a bigger version of this, flat sides all around. This happens to be a Chouinard Micro, so Chouinard's first stoppers were just bigger versions of this that were more like this, that were wired. It was only later that they put the curved sides on. And this all, of course, is several years, decades before spring-loaded camming devices were invented, so that was later. So there's a very short history of wired stoppers. Of course, when Friends came in, invented first by Ray Jardine, rigid stem Friends, those completely changed the game. But that's another story.